In this video, we are going to look at the exhaust cutout motor controller. If you already installed the cutouts, then you most likely want to automate the opening and closing operations. The controller shown in this video simplifies the wiring and also provides features like one-touch cutout operation and automatic closing of the flap on the initial engine startup. The controller is very simple in operations and can be controlled with a single momentary button, a latching button, or a rocker switch. So let's take a look at the practical example we have here. We have a controller connected to a 12 volts battery, then we have a single cutout motor connected to the controller, and we have a single momentary push button connected as well. To better describe the connections, I took the board out of the box so you can see the label and the terminals. To connect the wires, you would need to strip the wires, then push the connectors tab and insert the wire. And here is a page from the manual. Again, the controller requires switching 12 volt source, such as an ignition wire. Connect switching power wire to the 12 volts terminal. Chassis ground goes to ground. Cutout motor wires need to be connected to the motor plus and minus terminals. The motor terminal would switch the polarity to open and close the flap. There is no easy way to tell which motor wires need to be connected to positive and negative. Connect the motor wires any way you want, you have a 50% chance to get it right. Later on, if you determine the cutout opens when it needs to close, then just reverse the polarity of the wires. TR1 and TR2 are used for a button or switch connection. For a single momentary push or latched button, use TR1 terminal. We will cover the different buttons later, but the main goal is to identify the normally open button contact pair. One side of the button will be connected to the switching 12 volt source, and the other would be connected to TR1. In short, we need to supply 12 volts to the TR1 when the button is pushed. If the button also has an LED, then it could be connected to be illuminated during the cutout flap operation. We will cover a couple of connection options later in the video. So hopefully the controller connections make sense. Since we have connected a single momentary button to the controller, the initial push of the button would open the flap and consecutive push would close the flap. Regardless of how long you are going to push the button, the controller supplies the power for a preset amount of time. The time it takes to open the flap depends on the mechanics of the flap and motor characteristics. You would need to measure the amount of time it takes to open and close your particular cutouts by connecting motor wires directly to a 12 volt source and time the flap operation. In our example, it takes about 3 seconds to open and close the flap, so we will configure for seconds in the controller's configurations. Let's take a look at how to get to and change the controller's configurations. You would need to use a smartphone or a tablet to connect to the controller. First, let's put the controller into configuration mode. There are two ways to do that. To put the controller into the configuration mode, you need to push the momentary button rapidly 10 times. The internal blue LED would light up. If that did not happen, then try it again pushing the button. The latching button would be hard to push fast, so there is an alternative way. The board has two exposed contacts on the side opposite the terminals. Short those two contacts with a piece of wire or flat screwdriver. Ultimately, the blue LED needs to be on, indicating the module is in programming mode. The controller creates a Wi-Fi network. Take the smartphone and find Timers.shop network and connect the phone to it. Once connected, you might get a warning message: the internet is not available. Disregard this message. Open a web browser on your phone and enter 192.168.4.1. You should see the configuration page. Click on Timers configuration. So the first parameter is the button selection. There are 4 different control options. Let's quickly go over them. The first option is for a single momentary button. Each push of the button will either open or close the flap. The second option is also for a momentary button but works slightly differently. A short push of the button will open the flap partially or completely, and a long push would close the flap partially or completely. This mode allows you to set a short duration for a flap partial opening operation. Each push of the button will keep opening the flap just a little bit, and a long push will either close the flap completely or just a little bit. It all depends on the timing you set for the opening and closing of the flap. The third option is used for a latched button. Push the button to open and close the flap. And the fourth option should be used when you have two buttons or a rocker switch. For the first three options, the button is connected between a positive 12-volt source and TR1. And for the fourth option, the rocker switch is connected to TR1 and TR2, switching 12 volts between them. Then set the open and close duration. Add an extra second to the timing. The motor cutouts are designed to withstand the stall for a short time, it will not harm the motors. And select if you want the initial closing of the cutouts. Click Save. Let's take a look at how to connect the button to the controller. There are various buttons available on the market. Some of them have just 2 contacts and more sophisticated have 6 contacts. For buttons with multiple contacts, we need to identify normally open leads. Use a continuity tester to find which pair is normally open. Normally open means there is no continuity between contacts, and contacts are shorted when the button is pressed. Here is an example of the button with multiple contacts. Contacts 1 and 2 are NC, normally closed, we are not going to use them. The 3 and 4 are NO, normally opened, those we will use. One of the blue wires needs to be connected to the switching 12-volt source, and other to the controller's TR1 terminal. Let's cover one last topping, the LED light. Some of the buttons have built-in LED. The black and red are ground and power lead for the LED. LED can be connected in multiple ways to light up when the flap is moving, or be lit all the time and go off when moving. Another option is to light up the LED only when the flap is opening or closing. If you want LED to come on when the flap is moving, then connect LED ground to ground, and LED power lead to the controller's I/N/D terminal. IND stands for indication and supplies power when the cutout is closing or opening. If you want the LED to come on only when the flap is opening, then connect the LED between the M- and M+ terminals. It will only come on when the voltage polarity supplied to the cutout matching the LED connection. Hopefully, this covers all the topics and you are ready to connect, configure and test the cutout. Don't forget to subscribe and get notified of new videos and news. Thank you.